While some people believe in modern machinery, modern architecture, and modern weaponry, we do know that so-called modern weaponry started way, way back. Now, looking at a prehistoric weapon first, we look at the bow and arrow. And what we know about the bow and arrow is that it was invented far before humans even existed. And the way we know this is that we find arrowheads that go back. Now, maybe it wasn't far before humans existed necessarily, but it's really far back. Finding these arrowheads basically concludes or leads us to conclude that bow and arrows were invented long time ago. Now, we still find societies that don't use projectile weapons often, but we do know that it started a long time ago. We see a slow process that changes from bow and arrows to even stronger bows and even stronger arrows, poison tips, all this other technology that influences it until we get to modern projectiles like firearms. But here's the thing about firearms. Firearms also have a very strange history. They really can't be placed on one specific location, as there were several people who'd played with the idea, even if they never got anywhere. From Native Americans to Africans to Asians, who ultimately were the ones who were the first to use it in large scale battle. So the Chinese tended to use it in real life for large scale battle. And then Europeans and Middle Easterners and then Africans at the same time sort of built these weapons and stuff like that. But here's the thing, when the Europeans got to these other civilizations who, for whatever reason, had not developed the guns as much as they had at that time, they gave them the guns. So, what did the locals do? They recognized how good they are. So what do they do? But first, before we go and talk about that, let's talk about crossbows. So so the crossbow, even though it's found in Africa, let's first talk about the ones that they've found physically and they can prove, okay, these are the oldest in the world. So far, the oldest ones are either from parts of the, and again, these are very primitive, just like others all over the world, but China and parts of Europe, and so the idea of a crossbow is not something that was created in the modern mind. It's something that a lot of people thought of, and in fact, pygmies are seen using it. Like this pygmy in this picture are seen using crossbows a lot, and a lot of the thought, because a lot of their life did not develop past hunter gatherer in some areas, but yet they had this crossbow, is that it's not due to trade, it's due to self, some idea they came up with by themselves. And it's possible that crossbow just existed everywhere around the world. It was just an obvious idea. Now, I talked about this in another video, that the crossbow could have been an idea that just happened, but because it happened in Europe at a specific time and they gave a lot of weight to it, that we look at it like some special event that happened. Just like how we look at the bow and arrow and think it's a special event because projectile weapons eventually win out in the day, whereas bombs, for a large part didn't do much damage in terms of historically. When you think about these giant explosives versus a gun, the gun is usually the one they talk about the most. But of course, once you get to the modern day, you get to the atomic bombs and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, where did this history start? And the history starts way, way, way back. But that's not something we need to talk about right now. What we need to talk about is the gun. So, of course, we see natives of everywhere around the world using different types of projectiles. So the Chinese are depicted in very early pictures, paintings, using guns, but you can see that their guns were more like aids than they were the actual point at the time. because arrows, bows and arrows were still very effective. So leaving out all of that, leaving out the firearm, blah 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 blah, we have to think about something that happened, which is how is it that this country that was coming up with this great level of technology let this technology slip through their arms in terms of development? A story for another day. What I actually want to talk about today is why is it that when the Europeans came, right, and they had a quote unquote superior technology in the gun, why is it that they gave to everybody, and instead of seeing pictures of just Europeans carrying guns, Kingdom of Congo, they start using guns. But not only that, they start manufacturing them. The Japanese start using guns. Everybody's using them. Everybody's making them. So what happened? What is it about what happened in Europe that made them so they used it so often that they could crush different civilizations around the world? Well, firstly, we have to refer to a writing in the Kingdom of Congo which shows that guns didn't just always win back in the day. Guns were a great asset. They were great in helping people win wars, but they did not always win. At the end of the day, strategy was everything. So I could easily prove to you that Japan manufactured guns. I don't need to do that. I could easily prove to you that some Americans manufactured guns. I don't need to prove that. And I could easily prove to you that some people in Madagascar manufactured guns. But I need to prove that the Kingdom of Congo, they manufactured guns. And I apologize if I've said this before, but it just hit my mind again because I still want to focus. I'll be focusing on East Africa. I want to focus on the Southwest Africa, but I need some kind of hook in. So I'm going to use projectile weapons so that we know the direction I'm going in is slightly warlike. So there you go. And you'll notice that two of the people who are warriors here are definitely men. One of them looks like a female, and as we know, women tend to be also enlisted in Africa for wars, and they go there voluntarily. And why wouldn't they? So let's just do a quick reading on the use and creation of guns in Africa. So it says here the people trade with the countries adjoining, selling and bartering salt and different kinds of cloth brought from India and Portugal, and using lumache, cowrie shells, as currency. They receive in exchange cloths made of from the palm, ivory sables, and belts made from the leaves of the palm, beautifully worked and much valued in these parts. Great numbers of crystals are found, and also several metals, but iron is most valued, and from it the people make knives, firearms, swords, and similar instruments useful to mankind. Read that again. But iron is the most valued, and from it the people make knives, firearms, swords, and similar instruments useful to mankind. And so this is how I can easily prove, because this is from a report from the Kingdom of Congo, one of the earliest books talking. In fact, it's so early that it talks about the conversion from the previous religion to Christianity by the Kingdom of Congo. So it's like very, very early. And they're writing here that the people could make guns. So making crossbows would be a piece of cake. There's some people who allege that the crossbows that were being made by the Africans were imported, which is stupid if you consider the fact that they could make guns. They could make firearms, which is written here by these people. And I can prove if you read the whole thing, can read yourself in this thing, in generosity of the vessels, blah blah blah. You can see that they're talking about the one of the kingdoms of this region. And of course, they say that they use Lumache as a currency. So they're talking about the local population. And they literally say that they build firearms out of iron. There you go.